The insider stock trades from last week that you need to know about. Starting off with the healthcare industry, where there's been a lot of interesting insider buying and selling. Eli Lilly had the CFO join in on the fun with a nearly $500,000 purchase. Technically, this was filed late last Friday, but it was included in this week's data, so I'm including it here. The CFO became the 8th insider at Lilly buying the stock, where they bought over $4.5 million of the stock after its dip after the poor trial results. It looks like the insiders are done buying, as there hasn't been a more recent purchase than the CFO's purchase last Friday. Even with the slight recovery after this dip, the stock is still down over 20% in the last year, and with a bunch of insider buying across the healthcare industry, it's pretty interesting. On top of that, one of the directors that bought the stock has averaged over 100% 3-month returns on their previous purchases. So we've got 8 insiders buying, a bunch of insider buying across the healthcare industry in general. The stock is still down over the last year, and at least one of the insiders buying the stock has a good history of stock purchases. Another big insider buy in the healthcare space was John Paulson buying another $300 million plus of Bausch Health. Again, technically filed late last Friday, but was included in this week's data, so I'm including it here. This comes after he made a $14 million purchase in June, a $21 million purchase in June, and then another $21 million purchase last week. It's also quite interesting because he's buying the stock directly from Carl Icahn, so we've got 2 hedge fund giants on opposite sides of the trade here. And unlike some of the insider buying at companies like United Healthcare and Eli Lilly, Bausch Health is actually up about 60% in the last 3 months, so it has very strong momentum, and he's continuing to buy it here. So very clearly, just like Eli Lilly, this is another long-term play by an insider. Continuing with the theme of insider buying at healthcare companies, we've got 4 insiders at Option Care Health buying $1.58 million of the stock. I haven't looked much into this stock, but it appears to have been struggling for quite a while, with the stock down over all the time frames that we look at, and it looks like the CFO has just resigned. However, it could be an interesting turnaround play here, with some of the insiders signaling that maybe this is the bottom and they have a plan to turn things around. So definitely worth looking into. And for the last healthcare one, I promise, we've got Baker Brothers buying over $60 million of Madrigal Pharmaceuticals. They've averaged over 12.5% 3-month returns on their previous purchases, and that's on over 70 purchases. Moving away from healthcare, we've got Charles Wesley IV, a director at Hallador Energy, buying over $300,000 of the stock. He has one of the better track records you're going to see for insider purchases, with the stock going up a ton after all of his previous purchases of Hallador Energy. This was also his largest purchase ever out of 7 purchases, and we saw this company pitched quite a few times on Join Yellowbrick a few months ago. You can just search for the ticker on there and you'll see all these pitches. But basically, the company's transitioning from a coal miner to an integrated power producer, so the investors are giving them a pretty massive price target if they're able to complete this transition. And the last insider purchase we'll look at for this week is Lumen Technologies. With AI-related stocks having run so hot over the last few years, we don't see a ton of interesting insider buying at AI-related companies, so it's interesting to see some here. The CEO and CFO bought a combined $859,000 of the stock, and these were the first insider trades of any kind at the company in almost a year. The stock has had a rough year, but they recently put out a few press releases talking about how they're upgrading their data center infrastructure for AI, so maybe the insiders believe things are going to start turning around for the stock here with some of these upgrades. Moving on to insider sales, the big ones being the CoreWeave and Circle IPO lockups are coming to an end, so there's a bunch of insider selling going on at these companies. We've seen over $500 million of selling at CoreWeave so far, and over $100 million at Circle. These obviously weren't surprises, everybody knew the lockup was ending, but we'll see how much the insider selling continues, and obviously it's notable that we do have some insider selling pressure going on at these stocks. We talked about all the bullish insider buying going on at healthcare companies, so we might as well look at some of the bearish insider selling going on as well. The CEO at Hims sold another $8 million of the stock. This was another healthcare company whose stock price had been hit, but instead of buying the dip, the insiders have been selling the dip. This sale was part of a 10b5-1 plan, so less notable, but his $33 million unscheduled sale last week is the more notable one. Insmed Incorporated has been on a tear, up over 100% in the last 3 months, and insiders have been continuing to sell this stock rise. However, the insider selling has not slowed the stock at all, with over $46 million in June and over $13 million in July, and the stock just continuing to go up even with that selling. However, all of this previous selling was all either for taxes or part of 10b5-1 plans, and we're just now seeing some discretionary unscheduled insider sales. A director, the CFO, and the chief people officer combined to sell over $7 million of the stock this week. Medpace is another healthcare stock that's on a tear after the stock popped over 50% after crushing earnings. It was kind of funny though, because literally a couple days after crushing earnings, All of the executives decided to dump a ton of stock and sold over $50 million of the stock. That was back at the end of July, and we're just now seeing another director join in on the selling by selling over $770,000 of the stock. The CEO at Carpenter Technology sold $4.65 million of the stock in an unscheduled sale. This is a pretty large sale for the CEO, and the stock fell about 7% in the following year, the previous time that he sold. A director also sold the stock last week. Avis Budget Group has had a stellar 2025 with the stock up almost 70% in the last 6 months. A couple of the insiders decided this was good enough for them, and a director sold over $63 million of the stock, and the chief HR officer sold over $1.5 million of the stock. The director has sold a majority of their holdings, and they average over 30% 3-month returns on their previous sales. The chief HR officer sold just under 20% of their holdings, and they average 20% 3-month returns on their previous sales. So both of these insiders have a pretty good track record of selling the stock. Find all the top insider trades at CEOWatcher.com.